you go here, it says, what about Douglas Fir? Who would like to tackle that? And if you asked it, feel free to elaborate what the question is.
So I'll take a quick stab at it. I'm assuming that you mean the Douglas Fir engraver that's attacking and killing the fir trees in Yosemite Valley or up near Yosemite. Yeah, it's another bug. It's natural, and their population is increasing, but not at the same level as the beetles down here for the western pine beetle and the yips. So yeah, it's a natural thing. They're increasing because those trees are drought stressed also. So they're suffering the same thing, just not at the same level. Does that answer your question, or did you want to elaborate? If you do, please raise your hand. Okay, next question.
Do you have a remedy for dangerous trees on neighbors' properties that are close to your own structures?
I didn't want this question, but I'll try. My serious advice. First of all, there's a book that was written that said trees make bad neighbors, and they really do when they're on the boundary. But my recommendation in the past where I encountered this problem in Maryland was try to get the neighbors to speak to each other. But if you can't do that, try to get their insurance agents to speak to each other. We had a similar problem in a small community I worked in West Virginia. And I was asked this question at a public meeting, and I turned around and I said, well, look, Mr. Mayor, why don't you speak to the lawyer that you have on file that handles the legal business for the community? And sharp as a knife, the lawyer got up and said, take those trees down, because he knew what the litigation complications were. So in the case of homeowners, try to get the insurance agents to speak to it. Will your homeowner's policy cover me if that tree falls on my house? Trying to prevent the individual neighbors from chewing on each other and creating bad feelings. But it really is an extremely tricky one, and I'd rather I hadn't been asked it.
Bob, do you want to go ahead and speak about the secret program?
We are working on grants. They're very difficult to get. Money is very short. Oh, okay. We're working on the grants. Money is very short. We have a proposal going in now that will cover some homeowners. What we're trying to do is concentrate on the 150-foot area around the house. We'd like to go larger. We are partnering with CAL FIRE to work on a senior wood program, because I don't think there's going to be money for this wood. There's too much of it now. And we're looking at a program to get the logs hauled off the private property onto a common place where CAL FIRE can help us cut it and split it for the senior wood program. I think it's going to take the whole community working together on this to solve this problem, because there's a lot more wood down than there are places to put it. There really are. I would like those of you that have trees, that have the time, to go back to our booth and just give us your name, your phone number, and how many trees, because that's the type of information we're using to try to pull some grants down from various sources.
Rich Drozen, CAL FIRE, Mount Blaine Camp, and Mariposa Division. This is my jurisdiction, my area of responsibility. We've been partnering up with the county who manages the senior wood program. We've been supporting that and running that with the CAL FIRE crews. As we have surplus wood available, and as several of the supervisors have been able to donate some wood and been able to provide some to some of the areas where we can go in, cut it up, split it, and then we have deliveries. We have one site that's located across from CAL FIRE on county property in Mariposa. Then we have another site that's located on the north side in Greeley Hill. So that is a very small program right now, and last year we gave away a total of 60 cord. Actually, the year before was 60 cord, this last year we're getting closer to 100 cord. That is a small scratch in what it's going to take in order to mitigate this issue. And just take 1 second here, we're going to try and expand this quite a bit so that we can have, we're trying for a grant, we're researching it, looking for different ways to where we can go out, pick up wood that's larger than 6 inches in diameter, bring it to a center where it can be processed and split up and given away as firewood. Doesn't require a lot of the permits because it's been given away. So we're still researching a lot of that. We need to find out what the short-term and long-term issues are there. The reality is what we need a place for the wood to go. That's going to take a cogen plan. That's really the only answer to what's going on. It's successful in some other communities. North Fork is way ahead of us. And basically what they do is they turn that wood into energy. And then that wood, depending on what kind of cogen plant it is, it either turns it into like a charcoal and something that sequesters the carbon, which then gets you into greenhouse gas grants, potentially. Or it just converts everything into energy, into electricity, and then it needs a certain amount of feeder stock in order to run. Without something like that, we don't have a good place for all of this wood to go. We don't have a strong timber industry in Mariposa County. Tuolumne does, Madera does. We've never had a strong timber industry here. We're kind of on the outsides of each of those. So we don't have a good option here for where is this wood going to go. So we have to try and create something. We have to try and create a little cottage industry to where the wood that's on your property is kind of like aluminum cans sitting around. We want somebody to collect those and bring those in so that they can turn that into something that's productive. So that's what Bob and I are working on. We're working through some grants. Stanislaus National Forest has been outstanding. We've received some great grants through the federal partners there. That's where a lot of the chipping comes from, through a Stanislaus grant. So a lot of the chipping that's going on now, going into a community and chipping that up, our Far Side Council, we have a great Far Side Council in this community. That's really the things that's saving us right now, is all the efforts that they're putting in with Bob, with Megan, with the whole group of personnel that are working there. We need more people to be involved in that. We need some really good grant writers. If there's somebody in the room that wants to donate some time, that's a great grant writer or has that experience, or even is pretty eloquent in their writing, that would be great to have some of that time to help us get through that, because we're running in these little hurdles. We're able to get through some of the CEQA concerns, the environmental concerns, and make sure that we have some of that done. But it's hard, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. Last thing I'll leave you with before I move on is this fire season, being on the 4th or the 5th year of the drought, has the potential to reset the record books. We talk about it every year. We're going to have a bad fire season. We got no rain, and everything's dry. We're going to have a bad fire season. We got a lot of rain. We got real tall grass. This year, we've had 4 or 5 years of drought, depending on how you count it, and we have a grass crop from Southern California all the way to Oregon. We didn't have that last year. Last year was an amazing fire season. The fire activity that we saw was just incredible. As Len talked about very well, when that fire gets into those standing slash, red slash areas, and some of our federal partners talked about it very well also, the fire potential, the spreading of those large damaging fires is incredible. So get the fuel on the ground if you can. Mitigate some of those dangers, especially 30 and 100 feet around your property. That's my soapbox.
Okay, we got a few more questions. We'll start with Beverly. So I'll hand the mic over to Beverly.
So a few questions I got. One of them was, is beetle eradication from the air being considered at the county, state, or federal level? And no, not at the moment. It's just that it's a very incredibly expensive procedure to get a plane and to do any type of beetle pheromone widespread application usually takes a fair number of acres to be implemented. So just on a homeowner's property or even a city may not be large enough, but so no, not at the moment. And then the second question was, a number of states have had success with the pheromone packets, and is anybody pushing for its registration in California? Right now, we are still doing studies with it. I know our Pacific Southwest region research is actually working on, tweaking some of the chemical structures as well as the components of it. So we're pushing to, once we finally get to an effective, dose, then we'll push for its registration. So right now it's still in research. And then my last question was, do these activities attract bark beetles if done during the spring and summer? So the activities were mastication, fuel breaks of 3 or more acres, cutting and removal of individual live pines, green pines, cutting and chipping of individual live pines, and pruning live pines. So yes, they attract. Yes, they do attract bark beetles. I won't lie to you. And I was promoting, thinning out the green stands as well. But for some of these treatments, they can be very ephemeral, meaning like they're very short term. And again, if you do the removal or the selection of trees in your stand, again, you're altering your stand conditions. So by creating more airflow through your stands and opening it up and redistributing resources, you're actually improving the vigor of those remaining for a short time. Yes, you are releasing terpenes in the air, and so that's why it's really, really important to take care of that green slash to prevent, keeping them away from the residual standing trees, to moving them to nice open areas where all of those volatiles can just be released straight into the air, or if they do get infested, again, they're away from residual trees. So they do attract bark beetles, but again, it's very short term, and anything you can do to protect and improve the vigor of your residual trees is a better treatment than kind of leaving it there and letting the beetles do the host selection for you.
Okay, my question is, if there are dead trees on National Forest land that is adjacent to my property, what are the options for removing those trees? Okay, we kind of talked about this earlier. What we've been doing is, for folks that have dead trees on their land, pretty much call the Forest Service office, and we've been usually issuing folks a free use permit to come in. We'll give you permission to cut the trees down, and then you get a fire permit to take the wood for firewood. So you can't really remove it and try to, sell logs off of it, because that's a timber sale contract. But, if you're going to cut it down just to get the hazard down, and you deal with the slash, you clean up the slash, and you take the wood for firewood. So, yeah, go ahead.
Are there seasonal restrictions to that?
Seasonal restrictions?
Yeah.
No, it's,
Cut down for a year, right?
yeah, use a, Mike Price, you answer that one?
You're going to have to repeat the question.
Oh, it's permits for private land, cutting trees along private land.
The Forest Service has no authority or responsibility for trees on private land. Typically,
That's not the question.
adjacent to private land. Okay, there's several situations we have developing here. Okay, we are issuing free use permits to fell timber next to private properties to abate the falling hazard to the house or to the structure or to the water tank or the pipelines. Okay. If we go into a contract situation where we're issuing a contract to sell the material, it engages all of our specialists because we have to bring equipment on the ground, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we try to avoid that situation. We want the population to be able to protect their investments in their property. When you fall trees on private land onto the Forest Service, you're technically also in violation of non-permitted use of National Forest lands. If you have that situation, notify us. We will ask you to remove the slash back away from the federal property onto private property for chipping or burning. No burning will be allowed on federal properties at all. Burning on federal land requires Forest Service personnel for liability purposes to engage in. But we are issuing free use permits to drop the timber and we force the slash to be removed.
Is that any time of year?
Any time of year.
Um,
Seasonality.
Pretty much any time of year, you will be subject to fire closure restrictions. You may be subject to limited operating periods for sensitive wildlife. We would prefer that these operations occur outside of August, September, but there might be windows when they will be engaged. That's why we would like these property owners to contact the North Fork office at 877-2218 and engage the Forest Service personnel so we can stay out of some real problem situations and work our way around some of these restrictions and still get the job done. Now, keep in mind, when you're bringing down trees, you're trading one hazard for another. You're removing the immediate hazard to structures or properties. You're delaying a hazard for the fire. So the slash needs to get out of there. The fines, the small material is very flammable. The boles of the trees, they may catch on fire. They're less dangerous to the structure because we can get personnel and equipment in on a fire emergency situation to deal with that. But you are creating a longer term hazard that's going on. And when we talk about drought, we're talking about, now you see the newspaper, you're talking about the 4th year of a 4-year drought. Okay. I started in 1975. My entire career has been a drought. Okay. Gardeners out there, I planted my garden in North Fork 8 weeks earlier than you're supposed to. Okay. When I came to the forest with Sequoia in 1975, rains started in the first 2 weeks of October that we don't see occurring until Thanksgiving. So the permanent drought situation in California is longer. We're in a Mediterranean climate, wet winters, hot, dry summers. That hot, dry summer period is just, 1 month to 2.5 months longer now. And it's not going to get any better. Your trees are in a permanent drought situation. So this is a long-term process. You're going to have to look at your properties every year and see what's going on. The best thing you can do is do the clearance around your structures, get the hazards of the brush slash removed. Remove what's growing so you have less competition, just like you would in your gardens growing tomatoes. Space your tomatoes plants out 1 or 2 feet if you want tomatoes. If you're not considered growing tomatoes, you can plant a bush and try to get anything out of them. They're not going to survive. So we're in a long-term situation here where this is going to be a repeated process, and we're going to have to hone our skills in dealing with it.
Okay, I got a couple that fall into my sandbox. One, is there any chance that additional mills could be opened? Sure, there's a chance that a mill could come in, some infrastructure could be developed. That would take somebody who's willing to invest in the area. One of the drawbacks to that investment is that we know that this bug kill is cyclic. So we know that this problem that we're going to have will last, 7, maybe 10 years, where we have this, all this wood available and dying off, assuming that the drought stops tomorrow. So if it continues, then the problem continues, and then there's a die-off rate because then we just run out of trees, right? So if we're going to double this year like we have, and we've gone from 10 to 20 or even 30%, and in some places a 40% die-off, if we double that again next year, that's looking at a 80 to 80% die-off of what's left. And so we're quickly going to run out of trees. Once we run out of trees, that decay rate of those trees is X many years. Well, in 7 years, those trees are no good, whether they're standing or not, at maximum. So they can't even be used for bioenergy at that point. So if there's an infrastructure that moves in like a mill, it's going to be very temporary. So it has to be either a small mill or something like that. There is opportunity there now, but they would have to begin the infrastructure now, which is one of the reasons why we're looking locally at getting like a tub grinder and doing a bioenergy plant like North Fork, because it's a temporary thing that then we can move on with. So there's a chance, but it takes investment. Next question I have is, do you need a permit from CAL FIRE if you plan to donate the wood? For example, the senior wood program, or to let other people in need? No, you do not. If you're not gonna sell, trade, or barter the wood, our regulation authority does not kick in. Remember, sell, trade, or barter the wood. If you give it away, you give it away. If you pay somebody to come and cut down your tree, you're paying for that service. You're not giving them the wood. That's not a barter. So don't sell, trade, or barter the wood, and the wood can go away. I already answered that question. Next is, I got a few questions on this page, so I'll handle most of them, but how do I know when to remove a dead tree? When is it unsafe? A dead tree is unsafe as soon as it is dead. Right? A live tree can be unsafe in some of these wonderful things we have here called the mono winds, right? So a tree is not always safe in any state. It is less safe when it is dead or when it is dying. Remember, a lot of these trees are dead and they do not know it. So they're already unsafe and they're already going to start dropping limbs and needles and whatnot underneath them. So 1, 2, 3 years, it gets progressively more unsafe as it goes, but it can be considered unsafe now. So it just depends on the tree and which way it's leaning and everything else.
Hey, Lynn, can I say something
Yeah.
on that one as well? As a faller that I've been dealing with the last few years on cutting, the key element here is, when these trees die, you pretty much, if you're gonna hire somebody to come out and look at these trees for you, they're gonna look at the wood structure and where they can fall that tree safely. The longer you wait to do that, it takes away some of that flexibility of the cutter to sit there and fall that tree in a safe direction. So the sooner you can allow him to come in and start falling trees while that wood's still sound, it gives a lot more flexibility because of the decay of that wood. So.
Yeah, just a little add-on to that is it also increases the fire hazard for that slash. That slash gets drier and drier and drier, and so it can become more fire receptive. So the sooner you can get the tree down, the better. The stronger the composition of the wood, like Bert was saying, it's firmer when it's greener, right? So we can, as fallers, you can kind of control where that tree's going to fall if it's a difficult tree. If it's just dead and punky, then when you put the chainsaw in it, it just collapses. So we don't want to, the sooner we can get in there to cut it down, the better. Another question. If pesticide is non-toxic to other organisms, why not spray? Well, unfortunately, in our current environment, spraying pesticides, like from an aerial application from an airplane, tends to be frowned upon. Oftentimes there are plants that are susceptible to those sprays that could be sensitive to the environment. And so spraying is currently not politically accepted, so that's very unlikely to happen. Would you agree with that, Beverly and Martin?
I did not.
Yeah. Waiting for cold weather or rain can and will prove devastating. That's correct. When we get a snow load on a dead tree, they break, right? We had Snowmageddon here a few years ago. Remember, a big, huge snow load and tons of trees came down. Oak trees, pine trees, everything. Roads were closed. It was very difficult. That could happen again if we have all these dead trees, which is why we're working together to try to get especially the trees along the infrastructure taken care of. This is a Forest Service question. I've got one more here. 800,000 acres, what are we going to do? Well, this is step one, right? Notify the community so the community can have an outreach and some information, because it's worse if everybody's scared of the unknown, but we know what's going to happen. The job that you guys have after today is to cooperate with each other, your neighbors, and in your community to spread the word of what's going on. Share this information. That's step one. Step two is to moving the information up the food chain to the supervisors and the governor to say, hey, we have a significant issue here. Part of that is going to be documentation and the photo points and whatnot. And part of that documentation is, of course, the more permits that come across my desk for the 150 and the less than 10%, the better. Because it will demonstrate that we have a significant need right here in Mariposa County. The drought strategies, Martin mentioned this. What are the drought strategies it looks like for the question? Mulch and chips. One thing I think this question pertains to, I think, here is you can use some of the mulch around the base of your trees and it will help the moisture resistance for the trees to keep moisture in the ground instead of evaporating. So you can use that. And then 3 questions here for the Forest Service, and I'll hand the first one to Bert, and it's right here, the 800,000 one, and then the bottom 2, Bert.
Okay, with French fire damage, do you anticipate road closures this summer on Minnerat's Mammoth Pool Road? Pretty much on the 1st of May is when the roadside hazard tree sale that we pretty much cut, it was about 1 million feet off of that road already. We've had 3 sites cutting along that road, 3 logging, we call them sites, they're logging contractors. They've impacted that road quite a bit with the roadside hazards. When they start cutting again, it's going to have heavy impacts, road closures, and we're expecting heavy impacts to that road. So if you can tend to go around the base over side, if you want to get back there, that would be less delay in time for you. But that road is going to get heavily impacted with harvesting along that road this summer. French got out of control fast and almost got Wagner's and Arnold Meadow. What will you do in the future for faster response? Okay, I was on the initial attack of that fire, and for anybody that's been in that part of the San Joaquin River Canyon knows where that fire started. There was only one road that goes down to it, and when there's a fire that starts down there, the fire's coming up at you, and you can't go down on top of it. So when we initially attacked that fire at 5 in the morning, we had 2 CAL FIRE engines that responded because our engines weren't on at that time, and we just couldn't get down on top of it. The fire was coming up. We did our best to get around it, and there are certain areas on our district and our forest, just like the Merced River Canyon, that when they start, we're very limited on how we can get down on top of these fires. Keep in mind that that fire started July 28th. We had the fire in the park going. We had a bunch of fires in Northern California burning, Oregon, Washington. Our drawdown was at high levels. So for these fires that are starting right now in the last 3 years, the Wren fire, the Karstens fire, the fires in the front country and Madera, Mariposa here, our resources are pretty strict. When these fires start breaking out, we have multiple fires, resources get really thin, and we're doing what we can with what we have. And, I got to commend the unit here for any of the fires that happen between the Bridge fire, the Junction fire, the Courtney fire, and even that little Pines fire over by Bass Lake. Any 4 of those fires, if the unit would have lost those from initial attack, they would have definitely turned into a French fire, if not a rim fire last year. So very, very good firefighting by the agencies to keep all of those fires small for where they're at. What the season holds, just keep in mind that we're not out of the woods yet, so do your best to, like everybody's saying here, do your hazard reduction and have a plan on what you're going to do, because it is going to be a long, hard summer for all of us.
Okay, I got a couple more. One is for the 10% exemption. If we do away with the 10% limitation, is there going to be an acreage restriction before you need an emergency notice? The 10% is property-wide. It's usually limited to, I want to say 20 acres, but I can't remember. I don't think there is a limitation. No, I don't think there's a limitation for the 10%. And is what they did in the past is eventually that area that gets a 10% exemption gets reviewed by myself or another state forester to make sure that they're still in compliance with the forest practice rules, which would include any cultural resources that you're not allowed to harvest on without an archaeological report or things like that, as well as harvesting inside the WILPEZs or the watercourse lake protection zones. You're still not allowed to do that. It's exempt from the timber harvest plan, but you're still not exempt from the forest practice rules. So it's still CEQA compliant, but it's not under the same kind of guidelines. So the ARC surveys and the property lines, they have to be, if an ARC site is found, you still have to say, I discovered an ARC site, a Native American site, things like that has to happen still. It's not just a way you go licensed timber operator. And remember, the licensed timber operator is a trained professional in harvesting timber, so they know the regulations already. That's why they have a license. Then the other part of this question was, who's responsible, the LTO or hire foresters? It's the LTO that's ultimately responsible for the work that's done on the ground, for whether or not it's, along the boundary line, the property line or not. That's something that's a civil matter between property owners, and the state tries not to get involved. Okay, next, hope I answered that question okay. I don't know who asked that question, but I hope that was addressed. If I have a dying tree, not a direct hazard, is it best to leave it alone to fall naturally, or should it be taken down for fire prevention? Correct, it should be taken down for fire prevention. A lot of these trees are going to provide these Roman candles if left up. So I would recommend at this point that if you have a dead tree, even though it's not a direct hazard to a structure, removing that tree and getting the slash removed, that dry slash that's standing up in that tree, as Bert was saying, get that down on the ground and get that slash taken care of and treated, so then it reduces the fire hazard for your property, which increases the protection for your neighbors and yourself.
It is very important this year because of the drought and because of dying trees that everybody pay attention to the defensible space. That 100-foot area is imperative that you keep it clear. We have a great shipping program. We have lots of money for shipping. If you'll get the slash to the roadside, the cut-ins out toward the road, we've got a good website that can explain it, or give us a call. We will come ship it. The big thing is that everybody realize this is going to be a highly volatile year.
Can I say one more question here is, what about the $117 SRA fee that we'll pay? Who gets the help? Yeah, everybody, this is a hot topic, right? Everybody likes paying that $117 fee. I understand that. We didn't enforce that fee. We just have to, we take it and we try to put fire prevention money, take that fire prevention money and put it out there to protect the public with that money. Some of the programs that are coming out this year with that money include about $9.8 million that's going back into the state of California. Part of that money, which trickled down to the Fire Safe Council here locally, was $161,000 that they wrote a successful grant on with Bob and his crew. Good job, Bob. That money is coming right back here to help mitigate hazardous roadways for non-county maintained roads. So to try to put some fuel brake management along non-county maintained roads, they've received $161,000 to do that. They did an awesome job writing the grant. There was a lot of hoops and hurdles this year for the state of California starting up that SRA grant-funded program. And so they did a great job doing that, and some of that money is coming right back here for you guys. Question?
Someone maybe to address PG&E and whether or not they have an increased plan for all of these deliveries.
I can talk a little bit about it, and then I'll hand it over to Bob. They have increased their utility work in the local area. I think there are 10 or so crews working pretty much every day, reducing the hazards. They'll cut down the hazard trees if you call them and identify trees. They'll send somebody from ACRT, right? Or whatever group it is. I think it's ACRT comes out and they'll evaluate that tree and what its hazard potential is, and they'll schedule it to be removed. They've been really good at coming out and identifying hazard trees. And slash. So they will typically lop and scatter the slash, and if they can get a vehicle to it, they can remove some of the larger material or chip it. But they have to be able to get a vehicle to it. Their legal limitation is that they have to be able to lop and scatter it down to about 18 inches high. So they can leave it legally because it's in the right of way on your property, but they have to treat it so that it reduces the fire hazard. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to remove it, and they typically do not burn it. So, do you have more to add, Bob?
Yes. PG&E has just opened up some of their grants for us. They've done a tremendous job. We get 3 fuel breaks, 2 fuel break maintenances, a chipping program, a weeding program out of their money last year. So far, we've been easy. We've put a lot in SRA, but we need a lot more back.
Okay, so open it up. Oh, one question over here.
I was asked to respond to a question, thank you. So the master gardeners often get this question. Hey. They often get this question in our office about oak tree mistletoe, and maybe Martin would like to say something too. But basically, oak tree mistletoe has co-evolved with mistletoe for millions of years. And the oak tree mistletoe is different from other mistletoes. It does make its own food, but it does take water and nutrients from the tree. So that can stress a tree. But typically, it will not kill a healthy oak tree. So if you have, let's say you have an oak tree near your house that has some mistletoe, or you're worried about the branch breaking off or something like that, then you can go ahead and remove that mistletoe. You just need to see where it's fastened on that tree, or so on the branch. And then you cut 18 inches back from where it's attached towards the trunk. However, if you have a highly infested mistletoe tree, or oak tree with mistletoe, and it's not near your house or in danger of falling on anything important, then I would say leave it if you care for the tree. Because the more branches you remove, the more harm you're doing to your tree than the mistletoe will. Typically, an oak tree doesn't like to be pruned more than 20 to 25% of its limbs or foliage in a season. So you don't want to do more than that. So if you have an oak tree that's highly infested with mistletoe, just let it run its course. Also, mistletoe does have some importance for our birds, who are also stressed by this drought. And in the wintertime, they depend highly on berry plants, like mistletoe berries, as well as the toyon berries that are around when the insects aren't. So there is a reason to have mistletoe. And I think, so you have to make those decisions yourself. I have seen oak trees die from having too many branches removed because of mistletoe. And also, if you have a really old oak tree, quite large and old, it is best to only remove less than 10% of the branches, or that tree will be completely stressed. So, there you go. You have anything you'd like to add, Martin?
I concur 100%.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes.
One thing that has not been addressed here at all is fire prevention. In the 50 years I've lived in California, I've seen occasional smoking bear, but we so familiar that we pay any attention anymore, really. I have never, ever seen a sign anywhere in back roads telling people, don't throw your cigarette butts out.
The ones where the cigarette butts are flying out the window. That's not the greatest cause of our fires, it's not cigarette butts, it's actually poor maintained equipment. The majority of the fires, if you look at bridge fire, some of the others, it's coming from the exhaust, and it's coming from your catalytic converter falling apart and coming out. That's over 1,000 degrees when it hits that grass. That actually lights a lot more fires than cigarette butts. So a lot of the issues that we're running into are related to the cigarettes, or excuse me, are related to the vehicles and poorly maintained vehicles. We have a couple of our defensible space inspectors in the back here. They're the ones that are coming around, and they're visiting all of your homes within the state responsibility areas, and they're handing out information. And they're also going to talk to you about your trees. They're going to talk to you about if you have a water tank, and especially they're going to talk to you about their 30-foot clearance, 100-foot clearance, and making sure that you have your clearance. We have inspectors coming around. Currently, I believe they're in the Ponderosa Basin, Lush Meadows area, or have you moved to another area? Okay, so two that are here are actually two from the Madera side, so they're working on in the Oakhurst area.
This is my comment, it's always good to make a suggestion, which is, I've never seen your signs, to have some more signs printed and sell them to the public. To to have school kids, scout troop, 4-H, other people, individual homeowners, put signs in front of your house telling people not to throw out cigarette butts. Just drive down to Fresno someday at the end of the summer and all little roadside flyers that have started for people throwing cigarette butts out the window. And also,
Another question in the back.
We are working as Fire State Council, we have just contracted with, well, not contracted, but we are working with Sierra Hotel Charter School. They are going to be making some signs that you will see that are sandwich board signs. They'll be going up and down Highway 140 and different areas regarding chains dragging on the ground, cigarette butts, get your camp wires out, those kind of things. So there will be more out there.
Thank you for coming, everybody, but we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We are about 15 minutes past 2. Thank you for coming.